Hey, what's up guys? So these are the Moondrop Chews. These are a $20 super budget friendly IEM that are pretty good. They're actually pretty great. I just reviewed, like right before this, the Moondrop Corks, which are a $10 IEM that I think are also very, very good. Now those things I put some aftermarket tips on, the same tips, the Moondrop spring tips that come with the chew, and that brought the price up to about $22 to $23. Now, because of the price similarities between these two with the similar tips, I'm actually going to be doing a separate comparative video, so subscribe for that in the future. So I've already kind of spoiled it by saying that they're very good for $20, but let's go ahead and get into why. I think the first notable thing is actually the build quality of these things. The corks feel like a $10 IEM. They don't feel great, but these things actually feel pretty good. They have a very solid feeling chassis. It feels very well put together for $20. It actually feels a lot better than some higher price IEMs that I've actually tried. So far, so good for the build. They are a forced over-ear design because of the angle of the cable. Now, there is no strain relief on this cable, so I'm not sure how much abuse this cable is going to be able to take, but for $20, I think it's a more than fair design. So they go around your ears like this. They're relatively small, even though they are more of a classic IEM style with a more elongated oval body. The fitment of these things is actually pretty good, though I do credit this a lot to the design of the ear tips, the spring tips from Moondrop, which are about $12, I think. The cable is actually pretty cool. It does seem to be about the same quality as those earlier looked at corks, but this one is a slightly smoked out, kind of slightly opaque see-through design where you can actually see the twisted cable on the inside of this cable. Now, as far as design and aesthetics, I think this thing looks nice and feels nice, and it's definitely worth the money on that end. Now, what impressed me the most on this headphone though was the listening impressions, and specifically the detail retrieval for $20. The amount of information you can get from your music for this price category is very impressive. Now, there are some other things that I think are not so impressive. It does have some downsides. It's not a perfect IEM, but I think that detail retrieval was one of the more shocking initial features of the sound quality. So most of this detail though does come from the treble response. Now, the treble response is a little bit of a great thing and a little bit of a knock against it, because while it is very detailed and it's got a little bit of forwardness to it, it can also be a little bit hot in some areas. Sometimes you do get some sibilance from the vocalist that something like the cork was able to avoid, though this does sound a lot more forward in the treble response and a lot more detailed than the cork did. It is a tiny bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it does have great resolution. On the other hand, it does have a little bit of a bite to it. Mid-range is a somewhat weak component of this. This does fall into my opinion of what a sort of a V-shaped sound signature would sound like. The lower mid-range specifically isn't quite as full as I would like, and this is actually something that the corks do better. I'll talk more about that in the comparison video. But for vocalists specifically, this definitely has a focus more on the upper mid-range capability than it does the lower registries. Now, because that vocalists do sound very present and clear, and this makes for some very, very good kind of cut-through ability for the vocalists on more busy tracks. Things like modern rap and modern R&B, which has a lot of present background music. This does provide a decent separation for the vocalist because of that top-end finishing. But when I'm looking for a more confident voice, something like Avi Kaplan, where I want that kind of mid-range tonal presence to really come through there, it does fall a little bit weak. Now, this is still very good for $20, and you're gonna have to keep reminding yourself of that. Like everything I say, both in its good components and its bad components, is at the price category of $20. So anything that's good, I have to be really impressed with, and anything that's bad, I have to be fairly forgiving with because of the price category. In terms of downsides for sound quality, that's one of the only legitimate complaints that I have about it, given the price for it. It's pretty decent in most categories of sound, and it doesn't really have any major faults. It just has nuances of its characteristics that I like a little bit more and nuances that I like a little bit less. Bass response is a great example of this. Bass is fast. This is a seemingly well-resolving driver through all of the mid-range, treble response, and the bass response. It seems very quick. Now, mid-bass through this is fairly confident without a lot of bloat, which is very good to see. That would be trait that I would expect to be kind of common for this price tag would be sort of a mid-range boxiness, but this seemingly avoids most of that, which is very nice. Sub bass is not something that Moondrop I think is really known for in the IEM space, and I don't think they should be, but I wouldn't expect good sub bass from Moondrop until you get to something like the Aria. But then you have the imaging and the sound staging performance, which is excellent. Because of the treble forwardness, you get this excellent sound staging scale to things, at least for $20. It's very, very good. You get these sort of, I'd consider it 3 main sections of position kind of preference. There's stuff in between, but these are kind of the bulk bodies of where you hear things. You hear things kind of out a little bit in front of your ear on both the right and left side, and then more centered down kind of that center lane. There's not a whole lot in that 45-degree angle, though it's not terrible, and there's not a whole lot happening behind or above or below you. I think those sections would probably fill out a little bit better with better sub bass performance that would make it sound a little bit larger in scale than it sounds right now. But then you have the positioning of the mid-range, and I guess I'm giving a little bit of a spoiler for the comparison video that I want to do, but the positioning of the mid-range between the Corks and the Chew is quite interesting. Because of the more upper end focus of the Chew, the vocalists do seem a little bit small. They have great position, but the size of them isn't that great. And I actually feel like the Cork fills out and kind of broadens the voices a little bit and makes them sound a little bit larger than the Chew is. And that is very impressive for a $10 IEM to be able to do that. And it is a little bit of a knock against the Chew, though the Chew's performance is very, very good. Now for some additional notes, the Chew does seem to have a fairly good sort of industry following frequency response for the $20 price category. It seems to line up a lot with what people's preferences on curves tend to be, at least, you know, as well as basically any other $20 IEM right now. It seems to be competitive in that space. So that's pretty much going to be it for the Chews. For $20, I think these are an incredible performing IEM. I think you should limit your expectations a little bit, though if you do that, I think you will be pleasantly surprised with just how good a budget IEM like this can be. Again, look forward to that Chew and Cork comparison video. I think that will be a very interesting video to see which performs best at $20. So until the next video, my name is Josh, signing off. I'd appreciate your subscription and a like if you liked the video. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.